I fear that what I'm about to say might come off either irreverent or even quasi-sacrilegious, but I've never liked the Beatitudes. I've always had an incredibly hard time with this passage, maybe for three reasons. One, we hear it all the time. And so with anything that we hear all the time, at least for me, it's just so easy to kind of tune out and I get lost. Second, because usually this is either translated poorly or it's explained poorly, which doesn't help. And third, maybe most importantly, maybe I'm just so sinful, I don't know that I want all these. I don't know that you do either. There's a couple of these that I relate to, but who here is really giddy about being insulted and persecuted? The world in which we live certainly is not aspiring to be pure of heart. Mercy, for all the ways we talk about it, is not something that most people give quickly, especially to those who've hurt them, and those are the only people who are really supposed to be merciful to, so you can almost throw that one out. So you're left with a couple of things that maybe we relate to. So what is happening, like right now? What is Jesus saying to you and me right now? What is he trying to convey to us, and what is he trying to accomplish within us? Part of the problem, again, as I mentioned, is just the way we translate this. So we've dumbed down a lot of this passage. It's more literally something like this. Jesus sat down and he opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying. It's like 3 times. He opened his mouth, he began to teach them, saying. We've reduced all of that to he began to teach them. But there's a reason why Matthew doesn't say it that way. He says it 3 times to reiterate something, like God is talking to me right now. That's what he's trying to convey. Because every time Jesus speaks, it's God addressing me one-on-one and addressing you one-on-one. And he sits down, because that's the position of a teacher in the ancient world, and he sits down on the ground because Jesus is Lord, and the earth itself is his throne. And so he's trying to tell us how to live. Part of the problem is, again, what we make of this translation. What does it mean to be blessed? How am I supposed to relate to blessed are they who mourn? I'm mourning right now. I don't feel very blessed. Maybe some of you don't either. We hear blessed and we usually think something like a feeling, but that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying those who have the possession of these particular things are in an objective state. Doesn't have anything to do with feelings. God's not trying to tell you and me, hey, you should just feel really excited when you cry, or when people mock you because of the gospel, or if you don't have anything. You possess something, and because you possess this, you are in an objective state. It might actually be better translated as something like this. Those who have these things are on the way. On the way where? On the way to conformity to Jesus. When I first began my conversion, which is still very much in process, as those of you who've been in the parish a long time certainly know, I got really excited when I finally identified with one of these. Like, I think I have that one. I don't have these other ones, but at least I got that one, so that's good. And I thought the Beatitudes were supposed to try to identify with one of them And then you just recognize, well, some of these things I'm never going to have. But at least I have this one. And then I realized, no, actually, I have to have them all. You have to have all of these. What the Beatitudes are an MRI of Jesus' heart. This is Jesus. This is him disclosing to us what he is like. And the only way for you and me to get into heaven, the only way, is to become like him. Which means, at least in my case, I have a lot of work to do. And so do you, probably. So at least for me, it helps to be realistic. It's not realistic to walk out of here and go, I'm going to have all these tomorrow. Because that won't happen. We become great, we become saints by cooperating with the grace that God gives us and being intentional and deliberate in working on concrete things that we don't yet have. And then acquiring habits. And then moving on to the next habit that we need to acquire. So given that, here's what I'd propose for most of us anyway to think about. Given what we're living in politically, culturally, and in the church right now. A friend of mine and I were talking the other day, and we were both sharing the simple thought that we, that is to say the body of Christ, we sound a lot like the world. Our discourse with one another sounds a lot like the world. We can't sound like the world. A Christian can't talk like the world. A Christian can't act like the world. The world has nothing to give to us. It has nothing that I want. The Lord has invaded my life and yours so that we would give something to the world, so that we would help it to encounter him, to become holy, to become truly human. And our discourse with each other oftentimes doesn't sound human, especially in social media, but not just there. And so the one beatitude that I would encourage many of us perhaps to start to work on is meek. Meek is the only word that Jesus ever uses to describe his interior life. In another passage in Matthew, Jesus says, "Come to me and learn from me. Let me teach you how to be truly human." And then he goes on to say, "For I am meek and humble of heart." Meek isn't typically a word that most of us get all excited about, especially if you're a man, perhaps. I say meek, and most of us have this image of kind of a wallflower, a pushover, a doormat. But Jesus was no wallflower, and he was no pushover, and he was certainly no doormat. Meek is best understood as strength under control. Some of you have heard this before, and perhaps on another occasion. It's actually a word that was often used for breaking a horse, for training a horse. So I buy a horse, I tell Adam, come on over to the house, check out the horse I bought. He walks over, he sees the horse, he goes, "Father, I think you got ripped off." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "The horse is wild. You can't do anything with it. It's useless." I go, "Oh, you're right. How did I not notice that?" I invite him back to the house a week later. I go, "Adam, check out the horse. I meeked it." It's actually a verb. I meeked the horse. It's the same horse. It's got all its power. But now everything is harnessed. It doesn't kick. It doesn't buck. It doesn't bite. That's Jesus. Jesus is the pure power of God, the one through whom the entire universe was made. everything he ever does and he ever says, he does out of love. Do you? And do I? Is every word that comes out of your mouth uttered in love? Do you kick? Probably especially the people at home. Do you bite? If so, maybe tonight's a night just to say, Lord, here's the reins of my life. Just like a horse, if it could hand the reins to a master. Meek me. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to snap. I don't want to kick. I don't want to bite. I want everything I do tonight, just tonight, that's enough to work on, to be done and said out of love. And if I wake up tomorrow, Lord, here's the reins. And meek me. And then as we acquire that habit, then we go on to the next beatitude, and the next beatitude, and the next beatitude. Here's the key. You and I can do this. We can do this because the power of God is alive in me and alive in you. It won't happen by trying harder. It'll happen by saying, Lord, I invite you into my life in a new way. I can't do this on my own, but you can do this in me. So do it, Lord. Take control of my tongue, my thoughts, my actions. Let it all, always be under control. And as you and I come forward for communion tonight, and we receive Jesus into our bodies, let's be conscious of what we're receiving. You and I are feasting on power. And he wants the result of that communion, that meal, to be that we become like the one that we consume. Please pray for me that that will happen in my life. And I will pray for you that it will happen tonight in yours.